Welcome to the Client Connection, where we bridge the gap between attorneys and clients to help increase case success. I'm your host, Edith Nazarian. I'm a criminal and immigration attorney based in Los Angeles, California. And today we will be talking about thinking outside of the box when it comes to representing criminal defendants and how clients can help in this process. To help me do this, I am very excited to introduce Stefano Molea. Hi, Stefano. How are you?
Hi, good to be here. Good. How are you?
Doing well. So excited to have you here. So, a little bit about Stefano. Stefano Molea is a San Diego County criminal defense lawyer and partner at the law office of David P. Shapiro. Stefano has successfully represented individuals of all backgrounds charged with crimes ranging from DUIs to murder. He is on the board of directors for the San Diego Criminal Defense Bar Association and has been honored as a super lawyer and is rated AV preeminent by Martindale-Hubbell. Okay, so Stefano, I believe that we have a lot to talk about and a lot of interesting stories between us.
Yes.
And what I would really love to hear, first, maybe how you got into criminal law, and then how you like to approach cases.
Yeah, my first internship after my first year of law school was at a criminal defense firm. And I remember the research projects just being very interesting in that they required sort of, I think it's fitting for what we're going to talk about today, but outside the box thinking, even just with the research and coming up with arguments based on what we find in that research, I just sort of was hooked. I was a philosophy major in college. And so for me, the whole dissecting of concepts and being creative with it is what really attracted me to the law generally. But for criminal defense, at first I thought, well, maybe I want to sue insurance companies, help the little guy type of thing. But then I realized like the day-to-day stuff, and no offense to the PI attorneys out there, right? But I really wanted to be in court and have a lot of interaction with clients and judges and other attorneys. And I just couldn't do the written discovery stuff that the civil lawyers have to do quite a bit. So for me, it's really, for all of us, right? It's keeping the government honest, right? Making sure that the system maintains its integrity, the balance. And so that's what got me hooked.
I love that. Yeah, that a lot of that resonates with me too. I interned at the DA's office when I was in law school, and I just love the hustle and bustle of being in court. There was never a dull moment, right?
Yeah.
And I was a creative writing emphasis English major in undergrad, so I love creative thinking. And just in speaking with you, I felt like, okay, Stefan is going to have a lot of great material that we could share with the listeners. So I definitely wanted to have you here today. Stefano, how do you like to approach cases when you get a criminal defense case? How do you like to do it?
Yeah, and so this is a conversation I actually have with clients sort of early on in the process, because I want them to understand sort of the framework under which I operate. Because informing them, I think, especially at an early stage, really helps them understand the process, and it, in a lot of ways, empowers them to help me do the best job I can possibly do. So, and I'll tell clients, whether it's a DUI or a murder, right, or anything in between, the process is pretty simple, right? First, we're going to look at the state of the evidence and assess, do we have everything we need? And what do we think about sort of the way they obtain the evidence, right? So we kind of do the analysis of, hey, are there any constitutional violations, right, that could impact sort of what we're left with as far as what the government is going to be able to put up to try to convince potentially a jury that each element of the crime has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And explaining that to them really helps them understand the importance of how the system really works, in that it's the government's burden, right? The prosecutor has to prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's why we really want to spend a lot of time doing that. So we analyze whether or not there are any constitutional issues. Then we look at, okay, where are we at with the state of the evidence? What do we think they're going to prove potentially at trial? And how is it going to be received, right, by a jury? And even though, statistically speaking, a lot of cases don't go to trial, that's the end game. So that's how you assess leverage in every case, is what do we think a jury would do? So I kind of explain all that to them, and then we kind of get going and start reviewing the evidence and coming up with, a theory. But a lot of times, as you do this for a while, and you know this, Edith, like the big thing is, hey, look, even in the beginning, before we get all the discovery, before we really dive into the state of the evidence, you don't want to just put all your eggs in one basket, right? So you're not going to just say, okay, hey, look, I know you feel very strongly about your defense, but we haven't done all the analysis yet. So let's say it's a DUI, for example, right? Well, why don't you just start doing some AA meetings, right? Or hey, there's your third DUI. Hey, you should probably be in an inpatient or an intensive outpatient, right? And we may have a great defense at the end of the day, and you may decide to assert that defense, and we can go to trial. Maybe we can win. But in case it doesn't go that route, let's not waste all this time by not doing things that are proactive that can potentially help build a nice net as far as mitigation goes, if that's the route we have to go. So that's
Right.
one of the things we talk about pretty early on.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about doing a full case analysis, but not just a full case analysis, a full client analysis, right? And knowing the client's history, seeing if they have prior charges, right? Especially if they're similar to the current charge. Definitely, I find that so important in evaluating a case is okay, what is this client's history?
Yes.
And then that will in turn help you strategize okay, how are we going to approach this case? How are we going to talk about it with the prosecutor, right? How are we going to present it?
Yes.
100% on board. Do you find that clients often come to you and tell you everything from the get-go? How do you approach clients when it comes to having them talk about a case?
Yeah. And also to your point about getting to know the client and getting their history, because that's going to help a lot. It's going to give us the tools to craft a narrative that's different than what the prosecutor's going to see or police have seen, right? Because for them, a lot of times it's black and white. They see the same
Mm-hmm.
thing day in and day out, and it's easier to just group everybody together. And so, like you said, getting to know the client so you can tell their story and identify things that can help in the case obviously is very important. So we spend a lot of time doing that even during the consult. So we'll spend, usually spend an hour, sometimes more, and sometimes up to a third of that time is dedicated to just getting to know the client. So, and sometimes clients have, they want to jump in and just tell you about the case, right? But
Uh-huh.
in the beginning, we'll set a little bit of an agenda. Hey, first, I'm going to get to know you a little bit. I want to history, your background growing up. I'll jump in, ask them about their parents, what they did for a living. What was their childhood? What did they play? Where did things go? Because a lot of times, with our clients who find themselves in difficult situations and made a mistake, let's say, the problems really started much earlier in life, right? There's
Right.
something there that has been unresolved that unfortunately leads them down a certain path. So identifying that is important, and it also gets them comfortable. But we talk about the background, and I explain to them, okay, then we'll get into the facts of the case. The way that I like to do it is I ask them, hey, what do we think the police reports are going to say? Right? Because usually when you're meeting with them, you don't have any of the evidence, right? You don't typically, at least. And so, and they kind of go through and they're like, all right, well, this is what I think the allegations are, right? And frankly, we do that just because at the very outset of a case, I don't want them to just kind of reveal every single thing about the potential issues in the case because I want to be strategic in the investigation that we do, et cetera. So we start kind of not superficially, but we go. The perspective is what is the other side going to say? What do you think they're going to say? And then we kind of go from there. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end, really, even when we're consulting with a client and they're deciding who they're going to use as their attorney, right? We give them options, right? And sometimes those options are, frankly, not to even hire us, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
real plan there is for them to feel like they have clarity because a lot of times just the circumstances alone are so overwhelming and the unknown is so overwhelming that giving them a clear idea of, hey, one of those options is not working with us and we want you to know why and what that might look like for you so that they can really make an educated choice. So that's usually how we set things up from the beginning with a client.
Yeah. Now, I love that you say that because it's true. They are going through such a difficult time, right? And our job is to help guide them through this really difficult process. I mean, sometimes there's so much at stake, and for us it's so important to fully analyze the client, fully analyze the case in order to help them achieve the best possible case result.
Right.
And I love that you say, sometimes that means, going elsewhere if necessary, because our ultimate goal is to do what's best for the client, right? And for me, I feel like when I consult with criminal cases, criminal clients, I always tell clients it's so important for you to be really honest with me, right, from the get go. Because in order for me to assess your case fully, I'll need to know really what happened. Because the last thing that we want to do, right, is to take on the case, start doing discovery, and then finding out actually, or getting the police report and finding out actually that's not what happened. That doesn't look like what's happened, right?
Yes,
So, yeah.
absolutely. And it's critical for us as we go through the investigation, right? Once we're on the case and we're dealing with the prosecutors and we're in court, it's very important that we don't make a representation or make a statement, especially in the early stages, right? When we're dealing, for example, with bond, right? We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
get our client out of custody, for example. And at that stage, at least at the arraignment, right? Typically, at least in San Diego County, we don't get all the discovery, if any at all. And so we'll usually do a bail review hearing, right, a week or two later, so that we can start reviewing the discovery. But there's also very specific things about the client that we want to let the court know about. And, we need to know the good, bad, and the ugly, right? Just to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we're not caught in a situation where you get the prosecutor who kind of perks up. Oh, really? Well, let me tell you about this, right? You never want to be in that situation.
Yeah.
So I agree with you,
Yeah.
and even on the factual side of things and the evidence side of things is, and I know we can maybe talk about this in a little bit, but just not going down a road that is going to be a waste of time for the client, a waste of
Right.
resources, and sometimes stepping on those landmines that they didn't tell you about, that they knew about, but they didn't want to tell you for whatever reason. That then, frankly, is detrimental to the case, and so and ultimately it's our responsibility, right? It's our job to make sure that the client is comfortable, that they understand the analytical framework and how it all works, that they can feel comfortable that it all makes sense. It's okay. So
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you. You don't want to be caught in any surprises, especially in criminal defense.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this would be a good time to maybe talk about a few examples that you can share, Stefano, about some cases that you've had where you had to think out of the box and, you know, maybe get a little creative.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a couple, over the years, and obviously, I'm going to change some things around just for privacy and privilege. But so probably the case that typically comes to mind is a case where my client was accused of being inappropriate in a public place, and essentially. The allegation was that he was a delivery driver for a popular delivery company, and he was harassing women. And so law enforcement sort of got involved. They interviewed the women. A couple women called 911 right away when the incident happened, and they were able to essentially identify, hey, it was a person who was a delivery driver. I know because he had a package in his hands, and then he um, got in a van and left, right? And so what detectives did is they went to the local distribution center for this company, and they said, "Hey, who drives in this route?" And matches very generic Hispanic male description, right? The women didn't get a great look, but better than many. Cross racial identification is always very tricky, right? And it's usually the worst type of identification. So It was very generic, but they had the route, and so they some manager at this plant said, okay, let me look. All right, around this time, during on this road, that matches the description. Here is this person, right? And so they gave him the ID, they gave him the picture, the name. It got put in a 6-pack, right? So for the listeners, it's just the 6 pictures that are presented to a potential witness, and there's all kinds of rules about how that's supposed to be done. But 2 out of 3 women said, "I think it's this guy," pointing to who eventually becomes my client. Right? And so it was obviously a very serious case, and the client had hired a private attorney who unfortunately wanted, without having done a lot of work, just sign on the dotted line and take a deal. And the client's like, I'm not doing that because I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on the case and we started working through it. And, it's one of those situations, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, about wanting to know everything, right? I looked at the investigation that the law enforcement had done and realized, well, they didn't really seem to go to the neighborhoods and ask neighbors if they had Ring cameras or security cameras. So I said, look, we can get an investigator to go out there and go through the neighborhood, identify any cameras, and try to get that footage. I'm like, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that if I'm going to see you on camera, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so he's like, no, dude, I did not. It wasn't me. I did not do it. So yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So I was like, okay, right? I'm like, all right. So at that point, I knew that it was going to be, I was going to have a lot of options as far as digging into the case.
Mm-hmm.
But before I decided to do that, I thought, okay, well, these trucks, I think they have to have like a GPS on them, right? The companies like to know where their drivers are.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked for GPS records from the truck. And I mapped it all out. Took a couple hours, and got the data. And what it showed was that during the specific times that these women said this happened, my client was miles away. He was in the
Mm-hmm.
general area, but he was miles
Yeah.
away. And we had the timestamps because some of the women called 911 right away and said, hey, 5 minutes ago, this is what happened. And so I took that GPS data and I brought it to the prosecutor's office. And
Uh-huh.
they spent a couple hours reviewing it, and they're like, okay, we'll dismiss it. So they dismissed that case. So what
Amazing.
makes this story a little bit more interesting is that about 9 months later, I get a call
Mm-hmm.
from that client. He's like, hey, just got arrested again. I'm like, for what? Because they're accusing me of the same stuff. I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
are you serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what? Like the same type of stuff? Like, he's like, yeah, same stuff. I'm like, well, what's going on here? Like, at this point, I'm thinking, did I just get totally fooled somehow? Like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so the allegations on the second case were that this gentleman was in a car, and this young woman got off from a bus, was walking home, and this guy in a car was like, "Hey, can I get some directions? I'm trying to find this place. My phone's not working." So this young girl goes over and plugs in the stuff on her phone and shows it to the guy in the car about where he needs to go, and
Mm-hmm.
he's doing something very inappropriate in the car, right? And so she freaks out, and he takes the phone, and she like takes the phone back and runs home.
Mm-hmm.
Calls, tells her mom, and her mom calls 911 and reports it. So a detective gets assigned to it, and just to make the story a little bit easier, on the second case it was a female detective. The first case it was a male detective because there's going to be some interplay. So the female detective does her due diligence. She's looking at, are there cameras or anything else? No. Um, and so she reaches out to the detective in the area who handles sex offenders
Mm-hmm.
and says, "Hey, does anybody on your list or your docket or people that you kind of pay attention to, does anybody match this description?" And again, it was a very generic Hispanic male type of description. They had a description of the car, which was strangely very vague. Um, And this male detective looks at his list and says, "No, nobody on the registry, but there was this one guy who came across my desk not that long ago." I kind of matched
Oh,
that it was
okay.
again my client, right? From that,
Yeah.
even though it got dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
So throws throws my guy's name into the mix. So now this female
Yeah.
detective takes the picture of my guy, puts it again in the 6-pack. Now
Mm-hmm.
goes and interviews this young girl who's under 18 and shows the 6-pack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple notes about this: no body worn camera, no audio recording, and her mom was in the room at the time this happened. The
Mm.
report said that she 100% picked out my guy. Said, "Oh, that's 100% him."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I'm like, "Well, this is insane, right?"
Yeah.
So the weird part, and I'm not going to get into too many conspiracy theories on this one, but they wait. So they have this ID. They know his
Uh-huh.
name, and they wait 4 months to go and pick up my guy and arrest him. And
Huh.
when they arrest him on a robbery, and they which as you know is a strike felony. They
Yeah.
book him, but he only gets charged with a misdemeanor, indecent exposure,
Wow.
right? And I have some theories, right?
Uh-huh.
When you book somebody on a felony, you get their DNA. That's one thing, right? So there's a couple things, and it was also very odd to me that they waited over 3 months
Right.
to pick
Yeah.
him up. Well, I get
Yeah.
the case, and I'm like, this is incredible. Like, does lightning really strike twice, right? I mean, in the
Yeah.
same place is pretty insane. So we go through it, and I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, what is this? Did you do it? He's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was not me.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go, right? And so what was difficult about this case was I had to recon. I'm like, okay, well, where were you? He's like, well, I don't know. It was like by this time it was like 4 months, right? Because it was
Yeah.
like four
Yeah.
months ago. So sort of the creativity came in trying to reconstruct a day from 4 months ago, just one,
Yeah.
right? And people are like, oh, that's easy. Try it as an exercise, right? Pick a
Yeah.
random day four
Exactly.
months ago, and then start working on trying to figure out where were you at a very specific time. At 1:30 p.m. 4 months ago, where were you? It's going to take some time, right? Unless you maintain a
Mm-hmm.
calendar or something, it's going to be hard. So we go through this exercise, and he's like, well, how am I going to figure this out, man? And I'm like, okay, well, look at all your credit card receipts, right? And your statements around that time. Where did you go? What did you buy? I use cash a lot, but sometimes I use my card. Okay. Look at your phone, right? Did you take pictures on that day? You know, and sort of start working on that. And so little by
Mm-hmm.
little, by using those sort of techniques, he figured out that on that day he had been to an auto parts store. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the incident happened at 1:30 p.m. and he had a receipt from the auto parts store at 2:10 on that same day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is helpful.
Uh-huh.
So I do a little, direction map questing from where the incident happened to
Yeah.
the auto parts store, and it was like exactly 35 minutes away. And I'm like, okay, well, this is helpful, right? But in
Yeah.
theory,
Yeah.
you commit the act, and then you drive 35 minutes, you get to the auto
Right.
store, and you do whatever you want. So there was some description of the clothing, and he also figured out that he had gone to the bank on that day.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I subpoenaed surveillance video from the bank. I was
Mm-hmm.
waiting to get that, and I got it, and it was from a different time of the day, but his clothing did not match what this girl had generally said the perpetrator was wearing.
Okay.
I'm like,
Okay.
okay, again, helpful, but is it going to be the thing that gets a case dismissed? Probably not, because
Right.
people change. It's easy to.
Yeah.
All right. So, building the case up for a potential trial, obviously, because the guy's like, I didn't do it, so we're not going to take a deal.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, well, I'm going to try to get surveillance video from the auto parts store. So we reach out, we send a subpoena, and I get a call from general counsel of this auto
Uh-huh.
parts store company, and they say, "Hey, Stefano, look, these things. They only usually last 3 months, and then they rewrite. These hard
Yeah.
drives are not just, they don't hold on to, 24-hour surveillance for that long, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, okay. So if I was a conspiracy theorist, I'd say, oh, I wonder why they waited 3 months. Again, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to gear up for trial. So 2 weeks later, I get a call from this general counsel again. And she's like, hey, guess
Hmm.
what? We found the video. I'm like, what?
Oh, wow.
I'm like, awesome. He's, yeah, I'll put a USB drive. I'll just send it to you. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
So she sent it to me, and he got there at 1:10
Oh,
and was
amazing.
there for like an hour. He went outside, was working on his car, and went back. And so I was like, oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so I obviously I marched that down to the DA's office like I had not that long ago, right? And dropped it off, and they dismissed it.
amazing. Wow. I love this example so much because it just reaffirms everything that we have been talking about today about being upfront, right? Being honest
Yeah.
with, the attorney. And then when it's true, really pushing to get the discovery, right? Because you really believe that, this person's innocent.
Yeah.
So I just love it. That's fantastic,
Yeah. So
Stefano.
that was a good one. Just it's just very
Yeah.
odd, right? It's like is this like Making a Murderer? That show.
Yeah.
It's like it's bizarre.
Nothing since, right?
No-
They haven't tried to okay, thank
Well,
goodness. No, have
that's
they?
where it gets weird.
Okay, okay, I'm listening.
So he, man, this is crazy. So he gets arrested a third time.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Gets arrested a third time, and the allegation on this third time is that he had parked his car in front of a patio, and that he was masturbating in his car. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so again, all in the same family of allegations.
Yeah. Yeah. They're building up an
It's
MO for
it's
him.
really odd, right? And and let me just say, like from the first to second case, this client was really starting to struggle with his mental health.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, why is this
Mm-hmm.
happening to me? Like, why am
Mm-hmm.
I being
Mm-hmm.
accused of something I didn't do, and why is it happening twice? And I'm getting arrested, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting accused, and I mean,
Yeah.
these are serious allegations. So he was struggling for a while, and so he's going to work. He parks in front of this thing, and there's a woman who says that she looked into the truck and sees him do this. And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, stop doing that!" And he gets out of the car. He's like, what are you talking about?" She's like, "Stop it! Get away from me!" And now you have to understand, he's very sensitive to being accused of stuff.
Yeah.
So she runs into her house, and he go. This is not the best judgment, but understand kind of the context under which his experiences dictated what he was worried about and
Mm-hmm.
why he did what he did. But he goes up to the door and he knocks on the door. He's like, "Lady, I'm sorry. Like, what did I do? Can you talk to me?" She's like, "Get away,
Mm-hmm.
get away. I'm
Mm-hmm.
calling the police." So the police come, right? And so now it's not a matter of whether he was there. I mean, it was him that was there.
Yeah.
The question is,
Yeah.
was he doing what she thought he was doing? So
Right.
this time, the cops have the body worn camera and they're interviewing the lady. Okay, and the lady's like, "I know what I saw." "Okay, well, what did you see?" "Well, I saw his arm move in a quick manner, and he seemed to have taken his shirt off, I think, and I could see him. That arm movement. I knew what he was doing." "Okay, well, did you see his legs? Did you see what kind of pants he was wearing?" He goes, "No." "Okay. Did you see his genitalia?" "No." "Okay. Anything like that? Did he say anything to you that was sexual in nature?"
Mm-hmm.
"No." "No. He just came up to the door afterwards." "Okay." And this is where again things get kind of weird for me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's bizarre. Like, I've never had so many weird things happen to one client or a set of cases.
Yeah.
This is not something that fortunately happens very often. Okay, but it's just very concentrated. So I want to say in most cases, law enforcement, at least it looks like they try their best and they're not shady. At least in my experience in San Diego County. But in this case, this officer is on body worn camera saying this. All right. So here's the scene. The woman's being interviewed. She seems upset. And I'm not saying she didn't believe what she thinks she saw. Just,
Mm-hmm.
my position is she was wrong about what actually
Mm-hmm.
was happening. And her husband's in the shot too, and they're talking. Okay. And this officer goes like this. He goes, "Hey, look, so let me explain to you how this," and this is after she gave the answers to his questions. He
Mm-hmm.
goes, "Let me explain to you how this works. I have to write a report. And I'm going to take this report and I'm going to send it to the prosecutor's office. And they're going to have to decide whether or not there's anything to charge this guy with. So, you know, if I put down in a report that you had seen certain things or you had seen certain details or what kind of pants he was wearing or, anything like that, that would obviously make the case stronger. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about it and I'm going to come back and ask you the question again." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This violates every sort of policy on how to interview a witness. Like, you
Right.
don't tell, they gave you the answer to the questions.
Yeah.
They didn't
Yeah.
say, "I'm going to
Asked and answered.
yeah, give me the answer." Right, exactly. Asked and answer. They didn't say, "Oh, I need to think about it. I can't recall." Right. And for him to kind of like set it up in such a way where it's like, if you want this guy prosecuted, you got to give me more. It is mind boggling. Right. It's and all of us, of course, whether you're criminal defense, whether you're prosecutor, anybody's going to be offended by this. Right. Um, so I was like, "This is wild." So, I'm talking to my guy, and again, it's like, "Dude, I swear to you, I wasn't doing that.
Mhm.
He was working construction. He pulled over. He was going to go to his brother's house, and he didn't want to get his brother's house dirty because his clothes were filthy. So he was changing in his car, and even put up the visors and stuff on the front to try to cover
Mhm.
himself." But he goes, "Absolutely not. I would never do that. That's wild." Right. And so we go through the case. I'm like, "All right, let's go to trial. Right, let's go to trial." The problem is that it became a scenario where, if he, because they were, even though two cases got dismissed against him,
Mhm.
they thought, "Okay, well, we were wrong. This
Yeah.
guy's a serial,
Right.
sex offender essentially."
Yeah.
And so they kind of took a hard stance on this case, even though there were some issues with it from the very get.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
as we have to with our clients, especially, and this is going to be totally in your wheelhouse, he had immigration issues. And if he
Mhm.
got, based on his status, it was going to be a very big problem if he got convicted.
Right.
So, as we're required, consult with an immigration attorney, assess the issues, and let's figure out what we want to do. And ultimately, he made the decision that he didn't want to risk trial because of the dire consequences if they believed her and not him,
Yeah.
because that's what it was going to come down to.
Wow.
Um, and so he decided to take a deal where essentially he pled not to the conduct that she alleged,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
things that were kind of peripherally true. But he was able to walk away, no custody, no registration
Yeah.
as a sex offender, and very little to no impact on his immigration status. And so he decided to
Yeah.
make the deal. So but that's the story. Yeah,
Wow. I mean, on the one hand, it's so frustrating for me to hear that
I
because
know.
I, like you, when I believe a client and I believe them to be innocent, and I'm very selective with the type of sex crime cases that I take on. I only take on the sex crime cases where I truly believe that the client did not do it. And I've had cases where I've really gone all the way with them up to trial because I truly believe that they did not do it, and I don't believe that they should take the deal. But ultimately, it's a great reminder that this is the client's decision.
Yeah.
The client is the one who decides their case, and our job is to guide them and advise them and ultimately do what's best for them. And sometimes taking a deal is for them what's best in their mind.
Absolutely.
But we do everything that we can to get them that the result that we find is best for them. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And many times I've sat across a client and said, "Hey, look, I don't envy your position right now in making a decision.
Hmm.
It's very, very difficult, right? And sometimes the decisions are easy. right? Like, let's say that,
Yeah.
you know, if the offer's terrible, it's an easy decision to roll the dice at trial, even if you think you've got a tough case, because you know the worst
Right.
case scenario is not going to be much worse than the worst case scenario if you go to trial and lose.
Yeah.
And so, obviously clients have different priorities, right? Some clients are like, I cannot step foot in jail. Or,
Hmm.
hey, I don't care. I could do my time. No big deal, right? But I'm not going to take a strike. Or I'm not going to
Hmm.
plead to this specific charge because I'm not,
Yeah.
but I'll take something else to avoid the risk of going to trial and losing and getting convicted of something I don't want to be convicted of. So
Right.
that, it's really prioritizing for them what's most important and then creating a strategy around it, and trying to achieve that goal. But, the things that's really, and these are the really hard decisions when you have a really, really good case. You have a really, really good defense to the case. If they
Yeah.
make you a good offer,
Yeah.
right? As the saying goes,
Yeah.
an offer too good to refuse. And so that's where I'm like, I can't, like,
Yeah.
what would you do? And I'm like, can't answer.
Yeah.
And what I do is I walk them through what my process would be to make the decision.
Hmm. Hmm.
What's
Hmm.
important? Like, for example, if you're an employee somewhere or you have a professional license, or you're going to lose your security clearance if you're
Hmm.
convicted of something, right? But this offer that they're making won't jeopardize any of that. Even if you think you're going to beat the case at trial, gosh, you can take a deal and avoid all that risk. And how does it practically impact you going
Yeah.
on out? But again, and we're talking about it kind of loosely, but at the same time, we're talking about a system that has the potential, and not just the potential. I mean, we know it happens, where people will plead guilty to something that they didn't do because either they want to
Yeah.
get out of custody, or because they're in a situation like this where the potential risk is so scary and so dangerous
Right.
that they're just going to take a deal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, the system's not perfect for sure, and it's very sad when that happens. And that's why I'm glad that
Hmm.
there was a lot of reform with the laws on bail, because people were just taking deals to get out of custody. And now, at least
Hmm.
in theory, that should be made a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I completely agree with you because ultimately we want justice to be done. We want what is just and what is right. I mean, that's what I fully believe in. But sometimes, just in terms of practicality, I'm just thinking about, I had a sexual battery case, and this client happened to have a history kind of similar of a type of incident involving that. And even though it was a misdemeanor, the DA, that they wanted to, the deal they were offering was a sex offender. He had to register as a sex offender, and he said, "I'm absolutely not going to take that deal. I will not take that deal." And I said, "Yeah, I believe you. I believe you did not do this. We're going to trial." And then the eve of trial, I get that phone call from the DA saying, "I have a non-sex offender, offer." And I told my client, he said, "I'm just going to take
Yeah,
it, because, that was for him the best way to handle the situation, not have to think about, okay, now we have to go to trial now, even though I believed we had a very good case.
yeah,
So, yeah, sometimes it's just about being practical, but at the same time, we're doing the best that we can to make sure the result satisfies the client. The client is good with the result.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
sometimes you get questions like, "Hey, can you guarantee me something?" And of course, no,
Mm-hmm.
right? And,
Yeah.
and what I always tell the clients, if anybody's guaranteeing you anything in the law, you should run the other way, right?
Same.
That's a risk. Um, but I'll tell them, "Hey, look, I will guarantee I'll do everything I possibly can to get you the best outcome," and that's the
Right.
truth, right? And my job, as I describe it to them, is my job is to present you with the best possible options. Let you
Mm-hmm.
choose
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do with my help, and obviously having engaged in the analysis. And okay, here's option A, here's the pros and the cons. Let's talk through it. Option B, same thing, so that they're really
Yeah.
informed and can never look back and have any regret about the way they did things, because it was fully informed and thoroughly analyzed. Um, and
Yeah.
that's fortunately proven successful. So yeah, so that was a big one, right? As far as sort of finding ways to think outside the box a little bit.
For
But
sure.
one other
That was
one that
great.
kind of stands out that happened a little bit more recently is a client was accused of stealing someone's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll be totally upfront here. The prosecutor on this case was fantastic. She was fair. She had a big heart, understood kind of the dynamics around the situation. And essentially, the situation was that if the ID was stolen, then there was going to be a prosecution. If
Mm-hmm.
the ID was voluntarily given up, even though, it's still a little bit of a problem, she wasn't going to prosecute for that charge, right? She was, I mean, obviously, if it's given versus taken, it's a different situation legally. So, I started working and I said, okay, well, God, this thing happened 20 years ago, right? How are we going to, again, how are we going to reconstruct something? Where are we going to find people? And so we spent a lot of time talking and trying to jog memories and thinking, okay, who knew who, and created sort of a map of people to identify who could be interviewed. And ultimately, we found some people who remember being there and remember sort of the dynamic of this
Mm-hmm.
person wanting to leave the country, and this person was going to leave her identity, and it was a U.S. citizen, leave her identity in in California for someone to
Mm-hmm.
use, and there was a lot of people who were jealous about who got it, who didn't get it, and so I provided different interviews, and the alleged victim in this case, the person whose identity was supposedly stolen,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
who came out of the woodworks, right? I mean, decided that what she originally planned on doing didn't really work out, and so now she wanted to get her ID back, essentially, right?
Uh-huh.
So she came back, and they interviewed her, and they said, "Look, we believe her. Like, we think there was opportunity and there was motive to take it,
Mm-hmm.
and we believe the alleged victim. So, unless
Mm-hmm.
you got something else for me, I'm going to file the charges." I'm like, "Okay, give
Yeah.
me like 2 more weeks. Let me see if I can dig anything else up." So I found another one or two people who sort of corroborated what others had said, right? So not anything big as far as new information, but just more corroboration. But then I thought, let me do this. I'm talking to the client, and I'm like, "Hey, do you how do you feel about a polygraph?" He's
Uh-huh.
like, "Yeah, I'll take a polygraph. I'm telling the truth." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
I'm like, it's you got to pay for it. Are you sure? She's like, "Yeah, no, I'll do it." I'm like, "Okay." So we set it up. Very reputable polygraph examiner. Used to work for the FBI and local law enforcement and stuff, and so very legit, obviously, and
Uh-huh.
passed. Totally passed. So I sent that
Yeah.
report over. Like,
Nice.
yeah, I guess we won't go forward with the charges. They the prosecutor appreciated it and bought into it. And I'm sure that she did her due diligence, making sure that the polygraph examination was conducted properly and it checked
Mm-hmm.
boxes as far as verification and all of that. And then decided, okay, yeah, we won't prosecute her. We don't think that there's, you know, the way that sometimes prosecutors say things diplomatically, we don't think that the evidence is sufficient to prosecute.
Yeah.
It's not, you know what? Yeah, this person that I thought
Yeah.
was telling the truth was actually lying to me. But yeah, it's all good, right? I get it,
Yeah.
So that was another one. That was a good one.
That's wonderful. No, I love talking about case examples like this because it just shows how when it comes to defending a client, there's so many different ways to do it. And when you think creatively, think outside the box, you can come up with such great strategies that, like you mentioned, the prosecutor was great. And I think it's so important to acknowledge, this is a process. The criminal defense system should be, like we were talking about, aimed at achieving justice. And the fact that you have this, you were able to obtain this piece of evidence and show it to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor was able to analyze it and assess, yeah, you know what, this isn't sufficient, right? And made the decision to drop the case. I mean, we need all parties to be working towards the right thing. And I love it when the system works that way, because that's how it should work.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, the fact that I think it just harks again to, your client is telling you the truth. There's no landmines, right? Because imagine if she took that polygraph and it just came out. I mean, they're not, perfect, but still to be able to feel confident and say, okay, you know what? We're able to go this route. We're able to, invest in this approach. And I feel like this segues perfectly into talking about, further talking about how clients can help us, come up with these strategies and help them with this process, right? So being honest, as we've discussed, is huge. I think in your first story too, Stefano, you brought up something important, which is what's at stake. What's at stake for these clients? And doing that at the intake process, like you were saying, what is their immigration situation? For me, that's definitely something that I always ask, since I do both. And it's so crucial to know, look, what kind of consequences are these clients potentially facing all around, not just with the criminal justice system. And just giving us a full picture of what is important to them and what deal can they take, what outcome are they able to accept. What do you think? What other ideas do you have about that?
Yeah. One of the things that I will speak to a client or potential client about before they become a client is that, this is going to be a team effort, right? This is going to be, in law school, we learn about different styles of practice. And, there's some lawyers that just sort of tell you where to be, what to do, and stay out of the way. And that's just, I don't find that to be effective. And I don't think it develops, at least for me, all the tools that are available to do the best possible job. So it's really a prerequisite. And I'll tell clients like, hey, I will not take every case that comes through the door. As a firm, we will not take every single case that comes through the door, because ultimately, it really helps everybody if we have the right client who's invested in their case and who's willing to do the proactive work, right? So some of the successful outcomes we've been able to get, especially in cases like where there's very serious crimes being investigated, and it's in the investigation stage, no charge has been filed, but maybe a detective is on it, there's an investigation, and it gets forwarded to a prosecutor for review. And this time is extremely important in being proactive. And so a lot of times I'll say, hey, are you willing to do X, Y, and Z? This is what is necessary to give us the tools to do a good job for you. And if you're not, that's okay, but it's not going to be a good fit for me, because look, one, I want to be able to do the best job I can, and I'm not going to do it with one hand tied behind my back. Two, it helps you, most importantly, which is the whole goal here. And so if you're not willing to do it, then why are you wasting your money on me? Don't do it. Don't waste money. And it helps everybody, right? Because then we get a great outcome because we got the tools from the client to do it. And so just creating a strategy and making sure that we get a commitment from the client that they're willing to do the work. And that's proven very helpful.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that, because, right, there's sometimes where a client will need to do a program, or, even before getting a deal, like you were saying, sometimes we advise a client, look, maybe you should start this program, maybe you should do this. And if you have a client who's kind of hesitant or not able to do what we are suggesting, because when we analyze the case, we think, okay, based on everything, this is the best way to approach it and take the case for you, right? So if we have a client that's not cooperating, who's not working on the team to achieve that result, then it's so difficult. It's almost impossible, right? And it just makes everything so much harder.
Yes, absolutely. So that I think that's a big one. And then, maintaining that communication, right? And always giving the client a next step. What are we going to do next? Who's going to do what by when? And, maintaining that communication keeps them engaged in their case as well, keeps them accountable. And make sure that they understand that sometimes, if we don't talk for 2 weeks, what I'm doing in the meantime, and during the conversation, you're going to hear about what's going on with it.
Right.
And so that is
Yeah.
also very important. Now, I'll tell you, this is different for every attorney, different style practices, right? Um, we also do not allow unfettered access to, like, we don't give our cell phones. And there's a
Hmm.
couple reasons for that. We want to keep everything within the firm and the business aspect of it, and everything's trackable, right?
Hmm.
Just that makes sense, right, from just a liability standpoint. But also,
Hmm.
it's because we want to have structure to everything we do here at the firm. And a lot of clients, especially the clients that we want as clients, appreciate the structure. And so, on the one hand, somebody might be like, oh, that's great. I can text my attorney at all hours of the day and they'll respond to me within an hour or two. That it may sound great, but here's the reality of it. And this is how I explain it to clients. Hey, I'm working on your case. I'm in the middle of reading your discovery. And I'm thinking through and I'm like figuring out a theory and figuring out an explanation about certain evidence or investigation I need to do. And I'm deep in thought, right? And then I get a call and I have to pick
Uh-huh.
it up. You want me to interrupt the creative work I'm doing for you to pick up the phone to someone else? No, you don't. You want me to do my job for you. You want me to be
Yeah.
committed to your case. And so for that reason, hey, you can absolutely call me. You can email me, and I'll respond to you within a business day, or usually much sooner, but a business day. You can call the office and leave a message, or you can call the office and get on calendar. So we'll have a scheduled time to speak, and I'm going to be prepared for the meeting. You're going to be prepared for the meeting, and I'm only devoting that time to you. I'm not doing something
Hmm.
else. And when you're a client, you don't want me interrupting my thought for someone else. So
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that's another important aspect of it is setting expectations for the client and making sure that they're on board and appreciate the value that it provides them in their case too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Communication is so integral to an attorney client relationship, and having them know what the communication looks like, the expectations, as you said, from the get go, will just help ease the process so much because then they know, okay, this is what's going to happen, this is what I can expect. And when they expect working with you to achieve those expectations, right, will only help with the whole process and the end result. So, yeah, I completely agree. This was wonderful, Stefano. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining me
Absolutely.
and all the insights. Yeah, this was great. How can clients find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Stefano Molea, STEFANOMOLEA. There's only one of me on there. So not a
Uh-huh.
lot of Stefano Moleas roaming around LinkedIn. And then I'm active from time to time on Instagram. Believe it or not, I got San Diego Criminal Defense as my handle. So
Nice.
I kind of beat the crowd on that one. So connect with me there. And then you can also email me at stefano@dpshapiro.com. And obviously give us a call at the office. Our phone number is 619-295-3555.
Perfect. Well, it was such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much again. And to everyone listening, you know how to contact Stefano if you'd like to talk with him further. And if you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe, like, and follow for more content. If you have any suggestions for podcasts in the future, or if you'd like to leave a comment, you can also email us at podcast@enlawoffices.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.